Welcome to the Paleo Post Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Chaggy, founder of the world of Paleoanthropology. Join us as we journey through time to uncover the secrets of human evolution. Each episode, we delve into the groundbreaking discoveries, fascinating research, and the stories of our ancient ancestors. From the latest fossil finds to in-depth discussions with leading experts, the Paleo Post Podcast brings the past to life. Whether you're a seasoned researcher or just curious about where we come from, there's something here for everyone. So let's explore our incredible human origins together. Hello, everyone, friends of the Paleo Post Podcast. We are back for episode 4, and we are so excited to be here. We have Genevieve with us, and we have George again back with us. He is back on his many adventures, although only for a short time before many more occur. We are so lucky to have these individuals with us who are so busy doing amazing work in the field with anthropology. And we have a very exciting episode planned for you guys today. So we're just going to start off with just talking a little bit about what's going on with us, which as far as I go, there's really nothing new with me going on, just continuing the path that we've talked about in previous episodes. I know that, as we mentioned, George has some exciting work going on. If you want to mention any of that right now. Anything
of course,
going
yes,
on, George?
Yes. Do you want me to speak now, do you?
Go for it.
Just
I want to hear
anything
it
quick and
too.
interesting about your work going on right now.
Oh, right. Well, it's multifaceted at the moment. I think I mentioned in the last time I was in front of you guys that I was near completion of a book, and the book is nearly complete, and it's going to be published. But what's been really flattering for me, and I don't know why it's happened, but I've had a contact from the Hay Winter Festival, which is a book festival, literature festival in the UK. It's the biggest. Yeah, it's the biggest one in the UK, Genevieve, and they want me to go and do a talk about the book. So I've had to,
Congrats.
yeah. But what's the big snag is, you see, when it comes to the nuts and bolts or the facts and figures of the book, I can talk no problem with about that. But how I constructed the book is a different story. So I've got to talk around archaeology. So that's a little bit of a problem. But I'm thinking about when I'm going to be doing it. So it's on the 30th of November, but I'm already thinking ahead about what I've got to do. So I've got that. We've also got, in terms of, and which is pertinent to this podcast, is I've got 2 more new dates for Bacon Hole. And for those people who have joined us recently, I've been involved in a project. I'm PIing a project on a cave site in South Wales where we found some lost cave art, which was found in 1912 but dismissed in 1928 as modern paint. But people who were in the know, and there were people in the know at the time, so in 1915, there was a guy called Morgan who went down to that cave and said, yes, we've definitely got cave art here, but it's been lost. Anyway, it's been found. It was found by a colleague of ours, Barbara. So I've sort of latched on and taken over the project to get it complete. We've had one really good date of the one sample taken by Alistair Pike, and he got a date of 17,100, which is fantastic news.
Congratulations!
It makes it the oldest painted and engraved rock art in the British Isles, actually in northwestern Europe. But what's really interesting is that Alistair was very, very gentle. He's one of the most gentlest sample takers I've ever come across. And he managed to get down layer upon layer upon layer upon layer to the final layer, which overlay the paint.
Okay.
So he got 4, I think I know he got 3 dates. One at 2,000, one at 4,000, and one at 70,000. But these were different layers of that calcite flow. And what's really interesting is that we took another 4 samples without Alistair, Hippolyto from the first art team, and Sarah and Virginia and Ugo came down to the cave in South Wales, took the samples, or took more samples, and they found the outer layers that Alistair had found which is the 2,000 to 4,000 layers, dated layers of calcite over the art. So, in many respects, they've really sort of backed up what Alice had already done, which is good news for us. So they came in about a week ago. So that's been really good news. So the book, Bacon Hole. Oh yeah, I had the pleasure of doing 2 PhDs a week before last, examining them. One was a very, very good piece of work. So well done, James, who comes from Denmark. And then I'm going to be doing another one for a guy down in the Ben Gurion University down in the Negev in southern Israel at some point. I won't be going there; it'll be online because obviously for security reasons, and I suppose on my behalf a little bit of ethics as well. So, but I'm happy to support this guy because he's a nice chap and he deserves a break. So there's that. What else is there? There's been loads of things going on. Oh yes. I think I spoke to people a few weeks ago about another piece of work that I've been doing in King Arthur's cave, and I can mention the name of the cave this time because it's now been sort of put through the bureaucracy that is British archaeology, and we didn't get any dates from it, but we have now got the first example of schematic art, painted art in the British Isles. So we have it in Spain, we got it in Portugal, we got a little bit of it in France. We've now got 2 panels in one cave, and that's just been published today. So it's all happening here.
Yay.
So it's
Congratulations! I mean, also, you've been championing Paleolithic rock art for years. Like, how good does it feel right now?
Well, I'll give viewers a little bit of an idea. Yeah. The age of me is the age of the bloody Paleolithic. I'll tell you now. I feel old doing it. But
that's huge, George. Congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm very excited that we've got Paleolithic art. We've got also people using a Paleolithic cave. And this is the schematic art.
Yeah.
Of early Bronze Age, maybe just heading into the Neolithic. So it's older than me, and so we got people utilising the cave space in later periods, which is again, this is what we should be expecting in cave. We see a lot of it on the continent. We don't see much of it in the UK, and partly because of really many respects, these caves were really smashed up by antiquarians 100, 120, 130 years ago. And so really, in many respects, we are picking up the crumbs off their very, very rich table. And the work we've been doing down in King Arthur's cave has actually inspired me to put in for a big grant to start looking at other caves within the area. Now, the reason why I've done this...
Like being really systematic about it now. Yeah.
Well, exactly, yeah. Well, the reason why I've done this, because back in 1993, when probably Seth wasn't born, and probably you weren't either, in 1993, I was part of a small project with Professor Nick Barton, and he did some excavations around King Arthur's Cave, Maddox Rock Shelter, and he also recorded some floors from other caves as well. And at Maddox Rock Shelter, which is now published, he found 5 tiny cowrie shells, which are not found around the cave site at all. In fact, you have to travel at least 70 kilometres to the nearest site of where these cowrie shells come from, which are on the coast, of course. So at some point in the Mesolithic, it was probably the sort of the early Mesolithic, middle to late Mesolithic, communities were either exchanging these for these shells with other commodities, or they were going on expeditions 70 kilometers to one of 2 beach sites where this particular cowrie shell comes from. So it's very, very exciting stuff. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it inspired me to rethink of the 40-odd caves that occupy the Wye Valley. The Wye Valley is in the Midlands of England, so to the southwest, just north of Bristol. It inspired me to put in for a grant to re-investigate these caves. Now, I do know that one cave is very, very interesting indeed, because I went there in 2003. So 21 years ago, again, probably before you and Seth were born. And I recorded on a terrible camera a series of cave panels, which I thought had art on them. And then I forgot about them. And then about 6 years ago, I decided to use my good old friend, Mr. D Stretch, decorrelation stretch, which is a color algorithm. And guess what? We got painted surfaces there. Now, just to make sure that I wasn't seeing things, I ran these past a very famous verifier called Jean Claude, who's French professor, who really knows his onions, forgive the pun, and he has confirmed that these are paintings made with human agency, and they're not sort of secreted hematite. And I agree with him, and I always have agreed when I first saw them. So I'm going to mount another expedition to look at that cave and the other 39 caves we have within the Wye Valley. So I'm about to apply for a big funding project to do that. And also, I also say for the listeners of this podcast is at that particular cave site, it's a swine to climb into, and the result was that in 2002 I broke my leg falling out the cave.
Oh,
there we are.
Wow!
Did you really? Oh my gosh, more stories! I love it. So, couple things I was thinking about. First of all, in the 90s, I was rocking big bangs and like low hanging jeans. But I did exist. So the Mesolithic, when you're talking about the cowrie shells, are we talking about 8 to 10,000-ish? Is that kind of the time frame you're meeting in the UK? Okay.
Yeah.
And also, just for the record, I have Cave Helmet Will Travel, so happy to come help you investigate the Wye Valley if you like. I'm always down with a good survey. And also, I was thinking about cryoclastic erosion here, because what the listeners, viewers may not know is, so the problem is with limestone caves is that, especially when they're closer to where the glaciers were and to the more extreme fluctuations between like the searing cold of the glacial maximum and the warming, limestone has all these tiny cracks and the water gets into it and it freezes during the big cold snaps, and then what happens is it smashes the rock walls apart. So you can lose entire layers of the wall. So I just like saying cryoplastic. It all sounds very dramatic. This is what's happened in Germany in so many places. They've found fragments of paint in the floor layers from these exploded walls, basically. And so that's the problem is, it's like, think of the way pipes explode in the wintertime or like that kind of thing, like it gets into it and then bang, it pops the wall. So, I think with the UK, because you guys were right on the edge, well, you're the ancestors there, were right on the edge of where the glaciers were, it probably was incredibly cold during the LGM, and we may be seeing that kind of back and forth between warm and cold getting into the limestone cracks, and then possibly it may also be that there are fragments of paint sitting in archaeological layers at these sites too, or sitting on cave surfaces. So I think that would be really intriguing as well. So that's where my brain went right away too. But what a wonderful project. I'm so excited, George. There's so much great stuff going on. Hey,
the King Arthur, what you've just been talking about is interesting for King Arthur's cave, because what you call, is it cryoplastic, did you say?
Cryoclastic, cryoplastic erosion.
We call it freeze-thaw processes. So basically, it's basically how water expands in cracks and basically cracks. But it's interesting about that Bacon Hole Cave down on the Gower and Minchin Hole on the Gower and Paviland on the Gower is that those three caves are these are coastal caves, and it's more than likely they were 40 meters longer than they are today because of that problem. Because of the freeze-thaw processing, and what's happened is that basically the ceilings are just collapsed in. So what we see today in terms of the archaeology or the lack of it in certain caves is because we're only looking at part of the cave structure. A lot of it has been lost. And for example, for Bacon Hole, which is a cave which points southwards onto the Bristol Channel, which is a large chunk of water, that's been eroded by salt water because it's a limestone geology. But also, I've looked at what we call the cave clitter, which is basically the large blocks of stone. and these are from the ceiling, and they expand 40 meters away from the current entrance today out towards the Bristol Channel. And the same goes for Arthur Stone as well. It probably was extended another 10 meters out. So in many respects, what we're looking at is very much a remnant geological landscape, and that's the or geomorphological landscape, and that's the issue we have. Well, it's the issue, but it's also the fun of trying to work it out, because the clues are there. If you look at the ground and see where these little stalls are coming up, limestone stalls outside the entrance of these caves, and that gives a bit of a clue that the cave entrance was much further forward.
I think this is where, again, geology becomes such an important complementary field and discipline that people we need geologists I mean, I think El Castillo for the work that we're doing too, to help us basically read the rock site that right? I think has at least a couple 100,000 years of constant occupation. I believe there the entrance used to be it was at least 50 meters further out. So basically, for the audience, if you're not sure quite what we're talking about, what happens is the mouth of the cave, because it's hanging open and there's nothing underneath it, there's no support. If it starts to smash, it just drops. And then what happens is the mouth of the cave is constantly moving backwards. So
Correct.
We may be seeing now, what we see as the entrance may previously have actually been a deep section of the cave. And that entrance place, which again is probably where the people lived and where the archaeology would have been, is now buried under blocks or has fallen into the sea, or the geology has changed dramatically. So yeah, it's such a there's so much still to do. And I mean, I think I'm going to use this to segue myself. I've just been looking at some exciting possibilities of some Middle Eastern stuff this week, but I can't say any more right now, but let's just leave it there. But some exciting, potentially large-scale machine learning type stuff, which would be incredible. So I want to take this chance to segue to the story that I'm so excited about, and I wanted to talk about today, which is from Spain, and is also about cave art, so yay. And it's about a site called Simya Gran Nord. And so where this is it's near Barcelona. So an area of Spain not typically known for its art. So anytime we're getting new sites, it's so exciting. And then I think this is exactly what George is talking about in the UK. And I'm not sure, for people who've listened to us a bit, you understand by now that, I mean, we're dealing with all we know is a fraction of a fraction of what exists. And even in areas that are and I'm using air quotes here, well explored and well surveyed, we're constantly finding new stuff. Or in a country like Spain, where we already know lots of sites, there's whole chunks of Spain that have never been surveyed. And so here we have again this wonderful study by these researchers who I just wanted to give everybody their names. It's always important to give everybody a shout out. So this is Salas Altes et al. So we've also got Garcia Diaz, Verges, Cebolla Soto, and Ignacia Morales. So that's kind of the team who did it. And so again, like I said, near Barcelona, very few caves known in that region. But again, you don't find until you go looking, right? And I just wanted to, because I think, Seth, I'll make sure you get the photos and we can get a link to the article. But the TLDR here is that they found, not only was it occupied by multiple groups of people, including both Neanderthals and modern humans over potentially a 40, 50,000 year period, but also they found rock art. So they found some cave art there. So, and guess what? It's all geometric. So yeah. So there we go. It makes me happy. So what's really, so we have some red painted dots and we have some abstract, non-figurative engraved marks. And they're sort of in one section of the cave in a couple different panels. What's I think is so interesting, and I'm not saying they're wrong. Again, I haven't been to the site. I've just read one article, so this is me coming from the outside, of course. What is that like? I'm the Monday morning quarterback or whatever here. But so they've chosen to associate the art with a later human occupation, modern humans, so Homo sapien, from around 12 to 15,000 years ago, based on there being a curved mark with lines behind it, which they're classifying as a claviform. At this point, I'm not saying yes or no, because again, I've just seen a couple photos. It can be hard to tell sometimes. but they don't have any actual dates for those marks. So at this point, there's no marks. I don't know if there's any calcite that covers any of it, or if future studies might have the opportunity to do some actual hard dating on or around the art. But I mean, so certainly it could be the Magdalenian folks. So that's the 12 to 15,000 group of people. However, those dots do make me think as well, though, about many Neanderthal sites. Because I mean, I think at this point, I come down squarely that Neanderthals were making art. I think that, again, at this point, we're just starting to expand and understand. But yeah, so we're going full team Neanderthal here. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. Neanderthals made art, and I think we talked about this a little last time too, Seth, which is that has the time come to start talking about a Neanderthal cultural art tradition, or
Right.
more than one tradition? I was looking at some Neanderthal engravings on portable pieces a couple days ago, ranging from 130,000 years ago to 50,000 years ago. And I was really thinking as well about the fact there's some really distinctive genetic lines and lineages of Neanderthals. So we could even be talking about different styles and different culture groups, right? So I think this is so exciting. Like, we're right on the cusp of opening this up. So I just wanted to flag that when I saw those red dots, and I knew that there were Neanderthal, like quite a lot of Neanderthal remains and lithics, so stone tools and other things in that. And then also those abstract marks, some of them don't look that different than the marks I was looking at the other day on like a raven bone. I think where's the raven bone? Was that one from Crimea? That one might have been Crimea. But I was just looking at some Neanderthal engravings literally 2 days ago. And so this is where, and the portable piece ones, just for viewers, if you're not sure, Neanderthal making art on cave walls has caused more of a stir and a controversy, but there is very solid evidence at this point across multiple sites in the whole of Eurasia of Neanderthals making marks on portable artifacts that have been found in very well dated archaeological layers in association with Neanderthal materials. So those are solid. So that's where I was almost using those a bit like the baseline to say, okay, if we have these things which are Neanderthal, we know they're made by Neanderthals, and we could call them maybe part of an engraving culture in this case, because these are all engraved marks. What could we then take this and go back and look at sites where we have evidence of Neanderthals living there and start asking questions of, are we seeing similar motifs? Are we seeing similar techniques? All that kind of thing. So I would like to say, congratulations to the team. Well done on finding new art in a very unexplored region of Spain. I suspect if systematic survey starts happening there too, that this number will continue to grow. I would just want to put the little footnote in there, though, that while it's certainly possible that one mark is a claviform, I would just be really interested to see if there could be any hard dates, because I do wonder if it's possible that some of that could actually have been made by Neanderthals as well. So I'd like to just open that door up and leave that door open, and I'm excited to see sort of where things go from here. But oh my gosh, and then of course, with those red dots, with the Raman spectrometry, like what the first art team's doing, I wonder, for viewers and listeners who don't know about this, so they're doing a chemical analysis of the pigments. I have heard that you can even identify saliva out of the pigments. So you see, I would be very curious to know if, those dots, I don't know if they were spit painted or made with a finger or what they were doing. But, it's like, those should definitely have some Raman spectrometry, like some testing done to them amongst other things. And I mean, who knows what we could find out. But every new cave, every new find opens a door, doesn't it? It's just amazing. So that was really, I just wanted to report in. I was so excited.
Yeah, generally, it's a question for you, because you're going to have the answer to this, I dare say. Is there a pattern emerging at all with all this new stuff that we're finding, which could be Neanderthal, in terms of its distribution within the cave system? This question probably. In your opinion, do you see a pattern emerging at all in terms of the distribution of this type of art, these non-figurative art forms throughout the cave systems that you've visited and I've visited in the past?
Well, this is where my brain has been going recently, is that I think there are patterns. And I think part of it as well is that starting to sort out what is Homo sapien and what is Neanderthal art. And so I feel like we're right at the beginning of this process, but I'm feeling like patterns are starting to emerge. And that's probably one of the studies I think I might lean into doing next, is actually seeing if we can start getting a little bit more serious about categorizing and actually discerning which is which. And so but yeah, I suspect, I mean, there's even within complicated sites like La Garma, for a few years now. Like, so La Garma is a site in northern Spain where it's one of the most incredible sites that has been found in northern Spain, with like just tons of gorgeous artifacts, like carved out of bone and things like that, and also incredible paintings on the walls. And then also people were actually living in that cave way deep in the dark zone, which seems very ritualistic and interesting, in these little weird round stone huts. So cool. Very weird site. But keep in mind that cave complex has other layers and other sections, and there's other sections of that cave where Neanderthal stone tools have been found in association with these more simple red larger dot marks, which are spit painted, I believe. And so this is again where we can have more than one individual, more than one culture, more than one species potentially moving through cave systems at different point in time. And so I think that that's really what this is going to come down to, is seeing if we can figure out what that pattern is, because it may well be that Neanderthals were using that space differently, and that we will be able to start getting a feel for it. Kind of like what we've been doing with Naledi in, Rising Star. Like, it's almost like you have to try and start learning their behavior patterns and understanding how they were moving around the site. And once you start doing that, then I think you can start almost predicting where the art should be if they were the species making it. And so I think that's kind of what we're moving into. And I think artificial intelligence could be really helpful for that kind of predictive modeling. Like, if we can set it up right with like grids and like give it the right data, that we might be able to use it in a very interesting way to start trying to answer that question.
Because I will add, and I think it's quite an important thing.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, one of my greatest heroes, Leroy Goron, his ideas of art being distributed around the cave in a particular way was stamped upon by, obviously, workers after him, and I think who had time on their hands and weren't thinking correctly. But it would be lovely to think that, in some respects, that he was partly right about where certain things. It's all about predictive modeling again. I mean, one thing I've learned over the last 6-7 years of me trudging around in caves is that I know roughly where to go to at least have an attempt to find it. And it's because you put yourself into the mindset, and the mindset of a modern human, of a modern human like myself or like you, is that we're stupid because we tend to go in dangerous places. But at the time when this stuff was being applied, these weren't dangerous places. They were essential places where people had to make their mark, irrespective of how dangerous it may have been. It was important for them to be down there. And this is what I've noticed time and time again when I've been visiting a cave site, especially with the First Art team, and we tend to do some really daft things. I mean, obviously there's health and safety. Yeah, I'll just say to the listeners and the viewers that there is really a little bit of health and safety involved in this.
Disclaimer.
But what's interesting is that some of the stuff that I've seen, the more spectacular stuff, has been the most awkward, dangerous locations within a cave system, and it's all about. I suppose in some respects, it's something which I've already gone on about in terms of Naledi. We have to take ourselves outside the 21st century mindset and try and think. And it's difficult, and it's in some respects it's almost, I say, it's near impossible. But to try and get yourself into the mindset of our ancestors or our distant cousins in terms of Naledi, to work out what might be going on. Because I'll tell you a really good story. I did a lot of work in the Val Camonica in northern Italy on open air rock art, Iron Age and Bronze Age, pretty straightforward stuff. And you go to the most obviously beautiful polished panel, which has been polished by the glaciers 10,000, 15,000 years previously, and you think, well, that's a perfect canvas for carving on, but no way. They find the most horrible panels sometimes to engrave on, and And when you start to think outside that box of predictability, of going to that beautifully polished panel and ignoring it, but looking for something a bit more awkward, that's when we're finding the art.
Oh, well, it's because literally the same thing that I found when I was working in Jordan too. I mean, was that again? I'd be like, "Well, look at this fantastically smooth, perfect, well-positioned panel, and it's empty." But then I have to climb over this boulder and be half upside down, and oh look, there's an ibex. So I think that's almost the key. Is like you have to learn, and every environment and every culture group is different, and I think that's almost like part of the craft in a way, if you want to call it that. And I mean, you're even better than me. Even the longer, it's just pure experience, right? Which is that we start to get it. And I think this is where archaeology is a hard science, but there is also a certain amount of feel to it, or instinct, which I suspect is our pattern recognition in our brains running ideas through it that we may not even be consciously aware of, but that we've started. You have to absorb it. But I find that anytime you're in a new environment with new caves, new cultures, that it takes me a few. That's always the first thing I almost want to do, is just kind of look around and start trying to get in their heads and understand the why. Because once you understand the why, then you can start predicting. And I think that's where, but the why is not necessarily, as you said, modern 21st century why. there's different criteria involved, and that's maybe part of the fun and part of the treasure hunt, right? It's trying to figure out what that is.
That was a lot, but very interesting information on cave art going on in, well, practically all of Europe and the UK. A wide swath of information. We will have links, pictures, details, and information for you guys to learn more. We want everyone to have a fair chance to learn what we're talking about. So we try to explain everything. I hope we're doing a good job. We're going to move on now to our next story, which changes from the artistic, more cultural side of behavioral anthropology to the strict biological side. And that is with the recent announcement of a 4.3 million year old Australopithecus anamensis mandible from Illoret, East Turkana, Kenya. And this is extremely important for a few reasons. First of all, what is Australopithecus anamensis, one may ask? I actually don't have a 3D printed skull, I'm realizing, which is a disappointment to me. I need to get one.
The hole in the collection.
I know, I'm just realizing. So we'll use Lucy. So this is an Australopithecus forensis, and this is a descendant of Australopithecus anamensis. This is a direct descendant. So Australopithecus anamensis looked similar to what we see here in Lucy, however, pretty different, much older. And the important thing about this was it was understood that, let me back up a little bit. In paleoanthropology, it's hard for anthropologists to understand that hominins can coexist. It's a very recent idea that has come together that hominins can be on the same paleo environment at the same time using the same or different resources. It's not, we had this hominin, they went extinct. We had this one, they went extinct. So on and so on. However, it is still important to know which species led to which species, which genus led to which genus. And as far as we understand it, Ardipithecus, such as Ardipithecus ramidus, Ardipithecus cadaba, were the ancestors of Australopithecus, the genus of the Australopithecines, which are of course, are the ancestors of the Homo genus. However, because of the date of this new mandible, this pushes back the date that Anamensis is prior to the dates of Ardipithecus ramidus, meaning one of two things. Either A, Ardipithecus ramidus is not the ancestor of Anamensis, and Ardipithecus is not ancestral to Australopithecines, which means they were contemporary and lived on the land at the same time, and we don't know how the tree extends back up at that point, continuing to muddle the waters, as we frequently call this time period. Or they are ancestral but Ardipithecus only lived on for a short period of time after this new species came onto the land and outcompeted them and outsurvived them, leading on to later generations and new species. Speciation is a very complicated process that we still don't really understand. Even when it comes to Neanderthals and modern humans, we're not really sure what a species is, where the line is. I mean, it's very complicated, but finding this fossil, which, first of all, finding a 4.3 million year old mandible is, congratulations to the team there on that and publishing on that. That's huge. And then having the dates on it that contradict what has been well established the last 20 some odd years is pretty big as well. And I'm not going to say this changes everything in anthropology because those titles, those clickbait titles that we see all the time, but it highlights the way that we view speciation and how genuses and new species appear on the paleo landscape. So that's my story for today.
That's amazing. So my first thought on it is, of course, a couple quick thoughts. So first of all, the idea that, as you're saying, I think the big thing for any folks who are listening who maybe aren't as up on the debates and the sort of the lumpers, the splitters, the how do we how do we organize things? I think the big thing, traditionally we saw it as being a single linear progression.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more like these skulls that we would find, or these fossils we would just stick as little dots onto this 2D line, and we'd be like, this one goes here and this one goes here and this leads to this, which leads to right. So I think that's where, to me, one of the points where it might help folks kind of wrap their heads around all this is that Homo erectus, who is likely ancestral to us, to Neanderthals, to Denisovans. I think that's probably how it's going to work. We don't have any actual genetics yet, but I feel pretty confident that Homo erectus writ large, however, I know there's different names in different areas, but that particular iteration of hominin is ancestral to all of us. Homo erectus themselves continued to live on in Asia until 250,000 years ago, maybe even more recently. And so, I mean, I think the point we want to make is that there is a good chance that ancestors of Homo sapien may have met Homo erectus in Asia if they lived on a bit farther. And so I think, and kind of like when we look at the split between Neanderthals and Denisovans technically were split off from Neanderthals, but then they continue to share the landscape, as we know, from Denisova Cave in Russia, including interbreeding and having hybrid babies. So I think it's more because we're the last ones standing in a way that I think that we forget how complicated it could be. So that would be, to me, I think that's it, but it's also it's fascinating and it's really exciting to see every new find is such a big deal. So it's a really cool, that's an exciting study. You must be excited, Seth, since you're the bone guy.
I'm sitting here and the stuff you're talking about, I'm like jumping out of my skin, like trying to not interrupt you.
Yes, okay, interrupt. Those were my big thoughts from the outside looking in.
Yes, Australopithecus, Homo erectus is the longest living hominin that we know of. It lived for something like 1.5 million years. And amazing. That span, there were so many other hominins that existed during that time that they could have met and interbred with ghost populations. Who knows where these species went? Who knows how many fossils we have that are just randomly. This guy, if I can hold it up right, who knows what this is? This is Kenyanthropus platyops. No one knows what this is. Who knows what this is? This is the only one like this. I mean, there are species out there that we truly like. Where did they come from? We have no idea. This looks nothing like anything. I mean, it's crushed, but it looks nothing like any other Australopithecine that we found. Like, I don't remember the date exactly on this guy. I think it's 2 million something. But the point is, hominins, there used to be so many of them. And I know in the last episode, Genevieve and I were talking about apes in Europe. But once we got past that and we got apes in Africa and they evolved the hominins, we had, again, a quote, planet of the apes, a planet of the hominins, where we had so many different species. There were hobbits on Flores until 50,000 years ago. There were, I mean, so many different little guys, and we don't know how we could have interacted with them culturally, behaviorally, sexually. You know, I mean, we know we interbred with Neanderthals. We know we interbred with Denisovans. We know we have ghost DNA in our genetics. We don't know what that is.
Yeah,
I know.
And
we find more and more. We know of one, at least, population. It could be Homo erectus. It could be Homo naledi. It could be, who knows?
Well,
it could be something,
there's different ghost DNA in different populations around the world. That's the wild part. So it's not even this is a one-time. So, the story is so complicated, right? Like this is a braided rope. This is not a single line.
Yes. So as you were mentioning, we previously identified it as it's called the line of progression, I think, where it's one. It starts with a chimp-looking animal, basically, and ends with now it's a person sitting at a computer. It's like the most recent ones that you see. But now, if you can imagine, so here's that one line for those looking on video, guys on audio. Sorry, you can't see it. Imagine just a straight line. Now imagine, let's just, for this example, you have 5 lines on top of each other. And each of those 5 lines has 2 different hominins on it at each end. And that's one period of time, but now there's, 20 hominins in that one period of time that are coexisting on different lines, but in the same area. That's how it actually was. And we call this a braided stream. You can call it a family bush, you can call it a tree, but personally, I prefer a braided stream because what that means and infers is that genetics can come in, they can branch out and go off and never come back, or they can come back 100,000 years later and come back in. A trickle could come in, a whole flood could come in. I mean, genetics are fascinating, and we are only at the beginning of understanding paleogenetics. And I mean, we're starting to learn about
Genomics. Yeah, isn't that proteomics or something?
Whatever it is. That is even newer than paleogenomics, and we don't even understand paleogenomics yet. So it's just, and for those who were wondering, so of course we're made of genes, we're made of whatever. Genes are made of proteins. So now we can analyze the proteins that we find on cave walls and try to figure out what hominin that was. I mean, it's mind-boggling how far the technology has advanced. And as George and I have talked about many times through season 2, and I'm sure Genevieve and I have mentioned, as soon as a new technology is invented, you have to practically go back and reevaluate everything. Because what's the point? And we haven't done that. We haven't done that ever, as far as I know.
We need more people. We don't have enough
exactly. So when we say, like George started our episode today with new dates for a site, and that's very important. We got new dates, those dates are updated, we actually know what was going on there. But for a site that was discovered and hasn't been touched since the 50s, we practically don't know anything because the information we knew is not valid. And in science, if it's not valid and you can't back it up and you can't replicate it, it's not correct. So somebody needs to just say, this is it, guys. We're doing it. Stop everything. We're going back. And I don't know who it's going to be or when it's going to happen, but it's going to take a lot of money and it's going to take a lot of time.
We need to do a full paleo audit.
Yes, a paleo audit. That's literally what we need to do. A paleo audit. That's really... And then when you even mention that, and then you think of the museums, there's so many things in museums that aren't even cataloged, that have never been dated, that have never been... that's a whole other topic to talk about.
So, but George, did you have any thoughts about Anamensis afarensis? Since I'm sorry, I totally jumped in and got really excited.
I do. Just one thing that viewers and listeners may not know, but I live about 9 kilometres from where Charles Darwin went to school.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, and he was born in Shrewsbury, lived in Shrewsbury. I went to school in Shrewsbury. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if we were to look at the finch population, the birds, the finches,
yes,
there are so many varieties of finches. There's obviously one genus, the finch, but there's so many different things that finches are doing in various different environments around the world. And I think somehow we got to not just look at the hard science. We've also got to look at the observational science as well about how these hominins were behaving, and that's so. What I'm trying to say is that a finch in the Galapagos Islands is different to a finch in the UK, for example, fluttering around.
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
I think that it's been acceptable, certainly when I was an undergraduate, to accept there were about between 9 and 13 different species of hominin emerging from ape or to where we are today. But that's quadrupled now, and
Yes.
it's getting more and more complex. And I quite like the idea of stream flow, because it's the whole idea about morphing. That we have to be very careful that we don't have this idea about one species stopping and another one starting. There has to be some sort of progression somewhere along the line, a transition or an interface between an emerging species and a species that's not, I would say, dying out, but is morphing into something else.
Absolutely. And that was one other thing I wanted to say about Erectus was, Homo erectus was first found in Indonesia. I mean, talking about behavioral differences, Homo erectus in Indonesia would have behaved extremely differently than Homo ergaster, which is what we call Homo erectus when they have not left Africa yet. Pre-Exodus Homo erectus, they don't really call it anymore. They just say Homo erectus now, but that's what Homo ergaster is pre-Exodus Homo erectus in Africa. Would have had a very different life than Homo erectus in Indonesia, but they would have been the same animal. And I feel that if we looked at Homo erectus over the 1.5 million years they existed, which, as a reference, modern humans have only been around for about 230. Archaic modern humans, 300,000 years old, compared to 1.5 million. That's nothing. The variation that would have occurred and would have been acceptable within the species would have probably been very vast. If you just look at modern humans and see how different we are, but we're all human and we're all the same species, imagine how different Homo erectus would have looked around the world over that period of time, yet still would have been so closely related that they could have bred, have been the same species, etc., etc. I think that's something we really need to consider. I mean, you look at Dmanisi and those fossils; they don't look anything like other Homo erectus. They were almost categorized as Homo georgicus. Some people think they still are, but it's been deemed that they're Homo erectus fossils that are pretty early. But there's just a very interesting point, is the variation that can occur in that and that we see today.
It's also down to taphonomy as well, really, isn't it? Because we got to find this stuff, and that's the big problem at the moment. Yeah, we have a limited. I mean, it was amazing when Lee Berger was talking about the idea of that he has the largest collection of hominin bones from one cave, more than the whole total in Africa, because he has a near perfect scenario whereby he's got an awful lot of bone material down in an isolated part of a cave system somewhere in South Africa. Before that discovery in 2013, we had scraps of little hints of fossil bone coming up in the landscape, in caves, sometimes in the breccia and whatever. And we have then tried to piece a jigsaw. It's a very, very fragmentary jigsaw to try and understand what we're doing. So, really, in many respects, start with Raymond Dart, for example, back in the 1920s. He found, again, a very lucky find, but there haven't been very many lucky finds since 1924, I can assure you.
No.
And the last one
was that Tong Baby? Was that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh, Tong Baby!
Oh, hello! How you doing, all right? Get back to bed. Past bedtime.
But George, that's what I always say too when I'm talking to like kids in a classroom or something too. It's just that after 4 million years, do you have any idea how much dirt has built up over those layers? Like, good Lord, do you have any idea how far that is down? I mean, that's why that Rift Valley in East Africa has been just this amazing gold mine, because literally the earth split open and we can see the stratigraphic. You can walk through history as you move downwards. But most places in the world, there could be fossils everywhere, but the 4 million-year-old layer in most parts of the world is probably a lot of meters under the surface at this point. And so again, you need those weird little time capsules of caves, or you need a split where the landscape is literally split open in a way that you can see all the history. That's where we find, really old fossils as well sometimes. Like, the UK's got all those wonderful fossil beds, right? But it's a fluke in a way. And that we have to recognize the rest of the landscape probably has it too. But the older it is, the harder it's going to be for us to find, right?
Well, I'll just refer you, both of you, to Malapa, for example, which was actually found by Lee Berger, in fact, in 2008. Yeah. And there was a swallet, what we call a swallet, but a sinkhole stuffed full of bone. Yeah. That was his luck. That was his piece of luck.
Yeah. But so, that's where, again, with the AI, start looking for predictive modeling with the geology for sinkholes and things like that, and then be really targeted. That's how they found Pinnacle Point in South Africa too, is they used a lot of predictive modeling, and they found those caves along the coastline there, which were well positioned for the environment at the time, and karstic, et cetera, and then they went and looked, and they found there it was, right?
Yeah. Speaking of Malapa, the way Lee found it was he literally pulled up Google Maps and looked for pieces of green on the dry, dead savanna, and he went, there must be water there, there's a cave there, there's something. He marked tons of spots, randomly went looking. One day at Malapa, Matthew, his 9-year-old son, was walking around and kicked a rock, and there was a hominin clavicle in it, which is what Lee did his dissertation on. And he recognized it immediately and went, bada bang, bada boom, we've got a site here. Yep. And there was Malapa, and we got Australopithecus sediba out of that, which I do have, but they're in the other room. And
I love all your fossils, though. I really like that. Why you're like, why don't we just slide this one out for you?
The one really cool thing about that one, I think I've shown it off in a video, and I'll have to do another one. I have the bottom part of the spine and the bilium, the crest, all that. And it's really interesting to actually have that part of a hominin, because they got that through CT scanning, and you can see where the femur would have attached, and et cetera, and et cetera. And I don't have their femur, but I do have I have other femurs from other species, so it's just kind of interesting to play Barbie with them and see what connects where.
Play Barbie.
They're my little action figures. But yeah. But bringing AI, if Lee tried to do that today, he could just tell AI to look for green spots on a map, and he will probably find plenty more caves, which is what they need to do, because we need more Naledi. We can't rely on just one cave to really base anything, frankly, on. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, this has been a big problem, I think, all the way through paleoanthropology, in that there's a hell of a lot reliance on one or two or maybe three skeletons, or part skeletons, which they then call a species. And I just think now we can sort it out one way or another because of the paleogenomics and also DNA. But previously to that, we were coming out with all sorts of things, and I refer to in the UK, the famous Piltdown Man.
Yes, that is. For those who don't know, I suggest you look that up. That is a story for another time, but it'll be a little fun game for you to, not game, but fun time for you to have of learning about that.
A
But
little
I
mix
think,
and
guys,
match.
little mix and match. Yeah, talk about playing mix and match for real. Um, I think this was a wonderful episode, you guys. I think we will wrap it up here.
Yep.
Just a few quick notes. We are, again, still accepting volunteers for the world of paleoanthropology for various positions, from writers, from writing grants to blog posts to making videos, social media posts. We have a lot of open available positions as we're trying to expand and spread science communication to more audiences. We have an application that you'll be able to apply to in the link below. And please, of course, like, share, and subscribe to this video if you learned something, had fun, or if you just think we're doing a good job. I think we're doing a good job. You guys seem to like what we're doing, and I really hope you do. If you don't, please kindly let us know. We will try to make the improvements that we can. We are all busy people. We all work on a very tight budget, but we all do this out of the pleasure of our hearts because we want to make the world a better place through education and sharing our knowledge. Would either of you like to have any closing statements?
I like it. That was a good one. Yay science, and yeah. I mean, it's so much. Honestly, I have so much fun doing this too because it's like it's there's not that many people in the world that I can really like lean in and like nerd out on this stuff with, and so it's really fun. I look forward to this. But I mean, I think that's the thing is that this is our collective history, and it's our pleasure to share it with everyone and to kind of keep everyone updated, and then also to help everybody be able to navigate when there's stories and like when and also telling you when does that maybe sound a little funny and not quite match with what what might really be going on, or any of that kind of stuff as well. So just being up to date. And I mean, I think what we started with, Seth, and I think this still holds so true, is that we're also trying to make sure that you are by far the most interesting conversationalist at any dinner party.
Yes. Yes. That is how this started. Because if I guarantee, if you start talking about anthropology or human origins, one of two things is going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to get a lot of good questions, or you're going to get left alone. So
Yeah.
depending on what you want, go for it.
Yeah, but it's awesome. Over to you, sir, Miss Dr. George.
Well, it's three conflicting forces coming into a room and chatting, and I think it's great. I mean, my background is very, very different to yours and Seth's, and I'm probably a bit more. I'm obviously a bit more long in the tooth. But I think what's been wonderful for me, really, in many respects, especially over the last couple of years since we've been doing this thing together, Seth and Jen, is basically is you think you know it, but you don't know. You don't know everything. And it's a vast subject, and it's a bit like when I started my PhD. I did it on Norwegian rock art, and you think, oh, that's quite a niche little subject, isn't it? And but you find it's not. There's a lot of people written a lot of stuff on it, and a lot of observational work and a lot of recording work and etc. etc. So in many respects, we have very, very general discussions, and for those of us, the three of us, who home in on certain subjects each episode, we know what we're talking about. However, it's surprising, how much and how vast paleoanthropology is. It's a massive subject. And I am interested to paleoanthropology, but also looking at the minutiae, and this is something which we try to cover with each episode we do. That's it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yay!
Absolutely. And guys, there's so much more fun to come in the future. We plan to keep this going, I'm sure, as long as we possibly can. We have so much fun doing this. Please share, like, and subscribe. Your support is extremely, extremely appreciated. And if you find in any other way to somehow support us, we appreciate it. Send this far and wide. We love you guys. Thank you for your support, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Cheerio.